This is kind of an interesting one for us. It's called our Saving Soils program. And it's one that is sort of the next phase of moving towards zero tillage adoption. But there's a particular area here in southern Alberta that's been slow to adopt zero tillage, and of course it's the irrigation sector. Because they have water, that limiting thing isn't as much of a motivator for them. I think there's a lot of reasons why we've been a little bit slower to adopt, but obviously the availability of irrigation and moisture not being as limiting has been a factor in slowing that reduction down. But I think, how many of you guys have actually in the last 5 years seen a major wind erosion event here in southern Alberta? Maybe hands up. So not so many. Are you guys from further away? Because it happens. It happens every year. If you work for the counties, they've been spending hundreds of thousands of dollars cleaning ditches out. So when we're talking about what, $20,000 an acre land now, we can't afford for that to happen anymore. Yes, it's exciting to have our potato friends here and expanding, but any of those sort of tillage type crops or root crops or anything that leaves the soil in a position that's vulnerable, we need to be doing more. And farmers are. They're doing a lot to try to improve and mitigate that soil erosion. So that's a pretty major influence here in southern Alberta. I believe that there's a European culture to blame. How many of you are European descent? Hands up, come on! You all are just about. Yami's the only one that can't do it. So the European culture, and I've had the luxury of visiting Europe recently, and boy do they love tillage. I never thought I'd get to see a plow working. Plow is common over there. I saw a group of farmers demonstrating some reduced tillage things, and they had a high-speed disc and a cultivator. That was their level of reduced tillage. So when we have a European culture, a lot of European farmers, no offense to the Dutch farmers, but they bring that culture and even that level of equipment with them. So we're using that equipment that's developed in Europe, and we're not taking the time or the energy or the expense to figure out ways to do it differently here. We're in a semi-arid region. We have 120 kilometer-an-hour winds. We can't leave our soil exposed. So that's when we initiated the program called Saving Soils, and to be honest with you, not an easy one to fund. So we have our ways of getting funding, we have our grants, we have our friends from Ardar here, but when you're looking at sort of small niche type things for even just irrigation in southern Alberta is niche compared to the entire province. It's always been a challenge, but we've been able to take advantage of actually a fair amount of philanthropic support. So there's a lot of groups out there that are interested in agriculture. You hear all of the Regen Ag stuff. Whether you're a believer or not, there is a consumer pull that's happening. And there's more and more of these foundations that are looking to support agriculture. So we've been fortunate to get a grant from the Weston Foundation, one from RBC Tech for Nature, and one from Farmers for Climate Solutions. And we're using that in a very programmatic, flexible way to study the intricacies associated with cover crops. How many of you guys think cover crops have been oversold in southern Alberta? Hands up. Don't be afraid. Nobody thinks it's been oversold? They want an employee? Yeah. How many of you are interested in cover crops? I love how the agronomists put their hands up, right? Cover crops are an agronomist's dream because it's complicated. And we're learning that even in our trials. To be able to figure out how to do it right is another level of agronomy. And we're going to need good agronomists really digging in and figuring out the fine details of what works and what doesn't. Those of us here, and Ashley, I think, put her hand up, I do believe cover crops have been oversold in southern Alberta. We are a semi-arid region. We rarely have enough moisture to grow the main crop. Cover crops on that type of scenario are very challenging. even in our irrigated sector, the water doesn't turn on until mid-May. We have a short season, and it can be competitive. Cover crops can actually be damaging to your main crop. So that was sort of my main point that I was hoping to share with you guys today. And a lot of our work has been showing that. If it's not done right, you're damaging the crop. Can it be done right? Absolutely. And I'm going to eat crow because the trial that I'm going to show you today actually shows some promise. Some of the results that we have show some promise, but it has to be done the right way. What do you guys think is the biggest challenge in cover crops? So the right species? Okay. Establishment. The unintended effects in general, controlling volunteers, diseases, all that sort of stuff. Anything else?
Nutrient use.
That's the challenge? Yeah, so that's if the cover crops are tying up nutrients that's now not available for the plant. Could be the reverse too. Any other challenges?
Water, moisture,
Okay.
soil moisture.
Taking up soil moisture. So in the semi-arid area, I think that's exactly what's happening. Short-term competition. We've all learned from years of research how important early weed removal is, and here we are putting one in there, right? So that's kind of contradicting.
There's another one, Ken.
Yes,
It's the challenge of managing cattle.
cattle in general.
Well, just because cover crops and cattle kind of often sort of work with that challenge. It's a challenge for guys that don't have livestock.
Yeah, I think cover crops with livestock combinations open up a lot more opportunities. Absolutely. What's the best cover crop we have?
What do you do?
That's a good answer. I was actually shooting for perennials, right? So if you've got a perennial, the goal for cover crops to me is maximizing the amount of ground cover you can have throughout the growing season. And we try to do that, right? We have a short season here. Our annual cropping system takes advantage of the majority of it. And our shoulder seasons don't leave a lot of room for growing. So the alternative to cover crops in dryland is residue, right? I look at the cropping systems that have good residue cover as the alternative in a semi-arid area, right? Cover crops in other parts of the world are actually to use moisture. They get too much. You can go to places like Ireland, they get 12 feet of rain a year, not 6 inches. So in those types of scenarios, the more water you can use so you get in there, the better. I think in our cases, the goals that you have set up are going to be dependent on every farm and every situation. So understanding that very clear goal, for us, I think the goal of the program is just to stop the land from blowing. And then looking at sensitive crop opportunities or issues, like potatoes, like sugar beets, like dry beans. We even have issues with seed canola. What's one of the big problems you guys have with seed canola these days? What's that? Volunteers, sure. Anything else? Flea beetles? You guys don't ever get into that situation where you have erosion or sandblasting? Yeah. So that's what this trial behind us is kind of set up to mimic, is how can we protect our seed canola? Because again, in seed canola, they tend to be more in cultivated lands. Then we get those big heavy spring winds, and next thing you know, you've sandblasted your entire crop off. So in the scenario behind me, we've had a number of trials over the last couple of years looking at different details with cover crops, but this one in particular has been pretty interesting. We actually had camelina here last year, so it would have been harvested quite early, like even in July. So with very little amount of residue left over, it had the hot summer, and we were left with a very bare ground. So we're like, okay, this is an opportunity to try out some fall seeded cereals. So the trials that we put together here, we're looking at fall rye. They were seeded September 20th, and we were planning on coming into canola here. So we did fall rye at 3 different seeding rates. So Andre talked about species. I think we need to figure out the species, but then we need to figure out what's the right amount of residue cover that gives you the goal, satisfies your needs without compromising the crop. So now we looked at seeding rates. We did 25, 50, and 100 seeds per meter squared. So we're looking at different seed densities. And then on top of that, we decided, let's look at termination methods or timing, because the termination timing is also critical. We've had trials where we're looking at roller crimping, like worst case scenario, we lose glyphosate or something like that. How can we deal with that? Like you guys have seen that where they'll grow a fall rye up to flowering and terminate. Do you think it works here? We're struggling with it. So I think with our growing season, yes, if we see the fall rye early enough in the fall, we can get flowering sometime in June and then terminate with a roller crimp. But do you guys like to see in June here? Not usually, right? So I don't think the seasons match well. It's not to say it can't happen with certain scenarios. Maybe a feedlot scenario where they're taking off a crop and then reseeding or going in for a second crop. But the number of, so in our cases, we used barley. So like, let's assume we picked a short season crop. So we grew barley, and that's what some of the results are on your handouts if you got one. To my surprise, we did two different seeding rates on the front page, a high and a low, and then followed up with different crops. This is a different trial, sorry. And the cover crops actually didn't compromise the yield unless we let it get to that longer growth stage. So when we terminated with a roller crimper or in-crop herbicide applications, that's when we started to see a yield deficit. Pretty significant, actually. The other trials, there's only one, but this is what's neat about research. If you look at the bottom right, under the dry beans, for some reason we actually found in 2 years, we saw a yield boost to dry beans. And so that's something we're going to further explore. So that basically means we let that fall rye get to that higher growth stage, terminate it, and somehow it's helping the dry beans. So that might be access to nutrients, but that's what's really cool about the studies that we do, is sometimes we learn things that were unintended. So that's a tricky thing to do in research because we want to do the same thing year after year. But in this case, we've done what we're calling adaptive research. If we learn something very sure, we're going to switch it next year and then completely change it until we come up with a solution that works.
So the living mulch the living mulch was terminated just at the time of dry bean.
Well, when we changed the definition to living mulch, it would have been terminated more at the in-crop stage. So the crop's growing. If we look at these trials here, that one behind us, that's a fall rye that was terminated in crop. We would have considered that a living mulch in a sense. There.
So terminated with
Yes.
But mulching is stuff like canola and shallow seeding, like good a winter feeder. I don't know if Triticale does it or not. It's a bit better than rye, because rye does that projected.
I'm glad that you asked that, because so fall rye I think is the best option we have for a fall cover crop. It grows the most. It has the most aggressive, the best winter hardiness, but it does have an allelopathic effect when you kill it and it breaks down. So does camelina. I think we might have even seen camelina. Brassicas have that same type of, mustard in particular has that effect as well. Things to consider. We didn't see any damage like that in this trial. So whether it's the timing or what, but we also have winter wheat as a cover crop. We think that winter wheat has some options because it still has good winter hardiness. It's still able to protect the soil in the fall. It's a little bit easier to kill for some reason. Fall rye sometimes just doesn't want to die. So that termination is a really critical piece. In addition to that, in this trial, we did spring barley, seeded in the fall. So in that case, we allowed winter to kill it. For each one of those crops, we did 25, 50, 100 seeds per meter squared. Spring barley died over the winter. Winter wheat, we did 2 timings. Pre-seed burn down timing and in-crop timing. So since you guys have been standing far too long, let's look at some of the plots and have those discussions. So come on over this way. Yeah.
Can I just make one comment on the allelopathic? Because we did some study on this, and so rye has an allelopathic effect. Rye has the maximum allelopathy when it's in the vegetative stage. We saw that with some trials, and then as it reaches reproductive, it's quite low. Now winter wheat is just the flip of that. So winter wheat is relatively low in the vegetative stage, but as it reaches reproductive, it has a high allelopathic. So It's
That's
just
a
one
really
of
good
those.
comment that explains some of the things that I've been wondering about. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rob. As I've been out here looking at these trials, trying to figure out what's best to show you, every time I come out, I'm learning something different. So that's what I mean. Like, to get into cover crops, you got to be willing to put in the time and to understand the agronomic details and where you can get the wins. If you come over here, you can check this out. All of this canola was seeded the same date. The cover crops are seeded September 20th. The termination dates are here. So we would have seeded May 8th with a DeKalb variety. Our spray date, pre-seed burn down, was May 6th, so 2 days before seeding. That's when we would have terminated some of these cover crops. And then our in crop was May 22nd. So we let that fall rye or winter wheat grow until we sprayed it out with the in crop. So here's the winter wheat, like you were asking about. This is winter wheat seeded at 100 seeds per meter squared, but it was terminated in crop. So not a bad amount of residue. What do you guys think about this one? Are you happy with that? Would you be upset with that? If you didn't have something to compare it to? Yeah.
It's emerged well.
So we definitely have a very thick cover. I think if you come in and take a peek, we do have reduced growth in the canola. Like, even if you compare it to right beside us. The one that Rob and Ryan are next to, when I first came out here, my eyes just went right there. To me, that was my favorite plot. What do you guys think? Does that look pretty good? You'd be happy with that?
Yeah.
What looks good about it? The canola itself looks good.
Yeah.
What else? So you've got nice ground cover. I like that in between the rows. You've got a lot of residue protecting the soil. It's probably even suppressing some weeds. Doesn't seem to be hampering any light. When I look at something like this, or even worse, back by George there, look at that mess, eh? Looks like shit from here. I think it might turn out pretty good. Yeah, but it just looks messy and ugly. But this one, everything laid down nice. So in that situation where you get fall rye this high, there's nothing in the heads. At least we were able to kill it nicely.
Yeah.
But in here, you guys can come on in and take a peek. What's the difference between these plants and those plants?
There's less plants, they're smaller as well.
Okay, so Ryan said there's less plants and they're smaller. Everybody agree? Does it matter?
This may catch up, but it's going.
So Rob made a good comment. It may catch up, but it's got a ways to go. We've definitely impacted the growth of this canola simply by when we terminated the crop. So yes, this is winter wheat and this is fall rye, but the bigger difference is pre-seed burn down termination, in-crop termination. I don't know if it's true or not, but I wonder about the shading. You know, we're going to create a little microenvironment here. I've always said that if we can get full canopy closure by the June solstice, that's what we want to do as agronomists. We want to have our solar panel catching all the sunlight at its longest peak. We're not there yet. So I think this will compromise yield. Data so far hasn't been showing it, but that's in more of a dryland scenario. There's another observation within this plot that I find quite interesting. Can somebody pick it out? Thank you! God, I wish I had a prize. So that's pretty cool. The flea beetle damage in this one is way less than without the cover. And the flea beetles were bad. So I on the desk there, somebody, Dean, pick up that ugliest canola plant there. That's not the ugliest one. Over the other way.
Which way?
To your left. Isn't there a really ugly one?
She's just flipping on right.
Did it blow off?
I don't know.
It's probably so shitty it blew off the table.
Probably shouldn't dry. Dry out already.
See that? So pitiful he couldn't see it. Look at the leaf damage on that. So this was actually from a plot without any cover crop. And I would hate to show you this, but the plots here without any cover crop, there's not even a crop. And I'm not a huge proponent of cover crops in general, but in this situation, they're working. So I'm willing to unlearn what I've learned and realize that maybe it is more on the intricacies of getting our agronomy done right. So I think a lot of these were actually either destroyed by frost or didn't get the right seedling establishment. So yes, we had a decent spring, but it was dry. And anytime we have a little bit of cover, I think it does something to the soil too. I think it's creating macropores. I think it's getting moisture moving. It's when you have a mat like this, the moisture is going to stay in there. And then when we do get a little bit of a rain, our germination comes. So every year is different. We can't come up with super hard set rules in agriculture ever. But there's something here, I think. Huge difference.
They're both fertilized.
Everything's fertilized the same, seeded the same. To be fair, I think even the soil texture was different. So we probably did a disservice by just seeding it back and forth and not adjusting it per situation. You ever got into one field and all of a sudden it's mellow and your seeder sinks and you're seeding deeper than you should? I think that happens to us sometimes with plots, but so it may give us a little bit of an unfair.
Rye is amazing in terms of tilt.
Yeah, it really is. So that's the great thing of having that living root in there for as long as you possibly can. But when we talked about fall rye liliapath, I don't see any here. In fact, we probably have to go to the pre-seed burn down ones, and we may have seen it. I'm sure we have.
Is this one just out?
So this is pre-seed burn down.
Pre-seed burn down.
And so in theory, we should see it here, or we don't. Yeah, come on and take a look at the in-crop stuff, the really ugly ones that I was telling you about. How are we doing for time, Jamie? 5 minutes? So they're not pretty, but I think we'll have a crop here. I think it'll be decent.
Hey Ken,
Yeah.
do you know how hard it was to get the fall rye to die? Was there multiple sprays?
No, this stuff died easy.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's the benefit of having canola. Brown or pretty canola, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Now, those are things to consider if you have the right seeder to be able to seed into that much material. In your handouts, or those of you that did get handouts, I put down the pictures of what it looked like at seeding. So it's pretty crazy looking stuff when you look at it. You know what? We only put one shot of water on just before the big rain, just so we had a decent looking crop. So you can look at the winter wheat first there. We got 25, 50, and 100, and you can see the amount of residue that was the differences between those seeding rates. So now you're playing around with how much of that residue do you want there. But then when you go to the winter wheat in crop, like we were imagine seeding into that stuff. So I think you do have to have seeders that can handle going through that much green material. And then the fall rye is even crazier. But I don't think, like we've got the Barton disc openers, and they cut through pretty much anything, but no, we did this with the planter. Sorry, this was done with the precision planter. So it was on 15-inch rows, but we do have residue managers. But that type of setup is going to matter too, and how successful your cover crops are. I think we're almost out of time. Are there any last questions or thoughts or discussion? Glad to see that you guys are optimistic of cover crops. No we were the only ones that were putting our hands up saying that it were oversold. I do think that we have to take it with caution, and I do think we have to respect that the amount of agronomy that we need to figure out to be confident in recommendations that we're sending out to farmers or even farmers, you're taking chances. And then throwing in the economics of it, I think is going to be a worthwhile cause. Number one proponent of cover crops is seed farmers. Just kidding, Ryan. All right, if you guys don't have any questions or thoughts, can load back up.
Main concern is glyphosate.
Yeah,
To kill it.
yeah,
That's the main concern for me.
I think so too. Well,
That's at the load. Like, we'll get the load back to you for the next time.